to do. I wasn't addicted, but I was what they call chipping. I was messing with it. So he starts crying. He starts, oh no, oh no, you don't. No, you don't. And I said, what? Come on, I just want to get high and go. He said, no. And he knocks over the table with the heroin. And then he picks me up. He's a big guy. And he slams me against the wall. And he starts slapping my face. And he said, I've lost too many people to this. My friends have died because of this. It's taken my friend. And you're my next friend. And he says, I'm not going to let it happen with you. You're not going to die on me. You rotten, he starts swearing at me and this and that. How dare you? You don't even go near this. This is not for you. Bang, bang, bang. Slap me around. And then, come on, we'll go have lunch. And then he explained to me how he had lost Charlie Parker and how he had lost different people through this and how he felt that I was a gifted person on a level that he wanted to be around and that he didn't want this to happen to me. And it really made me turn around. It made me think, well, what am I doing? Do I want to mess with this stuff? Am I really getting into something I won't be able to get out of? Because I always thought I could get out of it. I'd get out and do a little bit, and he actually saved my life in a way.
This is a wild story. Wow.
Yeah, it's
so the right place at the right time.
Right place at the right time, but I'll never forget how sad he was and that tears were streaming down his face as he was slapping me.
Well, maybe if he didn't have this strong emotional reaction, you wouldn't be affected so much. So that's what he needed in order to affect you.
That's what happened, and then we had a big argument on the Italian radio one night. This is just the lighter side of it. We're playing a concert at this festival in Monterodoni, and he keeps insisting that my name is pronounced Mover. And I said, it's Mover. And we get into this thing where we end up like screaming at each other on the radio, I told you my damn name, blah, 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 and then he says, it's Mover. And so
that's funny.
He would do these little things. Anyway, he's another guy I miss. He would always give me his clothing. His old, you go and he'd give you a care package of like, oh, here's that sweater. I love this sweater, but I wore it too much. Why don't you take it? This and that. And then one year I ran into Phil Woods and I said, oh yeah, I just saw Tony Scott. He said he'd seen you recently. And yeah, and Phil said, yeah, did he give you any clothes?
Well, it makes sense. If you wear something, you were on stage a lot with it, then you pass it along.
Yeah. So two other things I wanted to get to with you. One thing is your recording history and the fact that you started your own record company and continue with your own record company. What was the evolution of that? Who did you start recording with, and what gave you the idea that you'd be better off having your own record company? How was your thinking along those lines?
Well, all the recordings I've done, all my own recordings, all came out on Enzik Records. Enzik means Anat and Music, Enzik. And there was I think when I was getting ready to thinking about having my first album, was a period that the big record labels were no longer supplying, they're no longer have the budget to find an artist and to really support and PR, and it became, there was starting to be a few more like independent records, and there was like a record label in Spain that a lot of friends were recording for, but I remember
Fresh Sounds,
Fresh Sound, yeah. And I remember that the deal was like people would record for them, which is awesome because they don't spend the money on the studio, but then they have to buy their own record for like $7. And I said, but the idea said, why would I record and give the recording and then buy it back if I can just record and pay for it myself and I have it and I own it and I know how many CDs were printed and who it was sent and what to do with. And I had this idea of like of try and do it on my own, and that's how Enzik Records started. So my first album, it's called Place and Time. You know, my friend Colin helped me, and we went into the studio. I hired the people that I admired at the time, you know, and that were my people I looked up to, and my quartet was there was Jason Linder, Ben Street, and Jeff Ballard playing. And Avishai, my brother, was a guest on a couple of songs, and I made their own album. And you know, the first album is the hardest because I didn't know anything about business, schmizness, and so I created the name Enzik Records. I put the logo. I hired a publicist, and I sent the album to magazines. And before that, I asked Nat Hentoff to write me liner notes, and he did that. Because Nat Hentoff saw me playing at the same festival we just talked about, the Clearwater Jazz Festival, and he wrote about me in the JazzTimes. And so I said, and he wrote very favorably. So I said, well, maybe I'll send him the record and he write liner notes. And
an honor in itself. He was really one of the last of the real. But let's continue where we were. We were talking about the fact of why should you buy your records for $7 plus? A lot of the record companies, you pay them maybe $5,000-$6,000, and they get you the publicity, the PR person and everything, and they pay for all that. And I guess that's what you get for it. I know that one of my records came out on a company like that, and didn't necessarily sell anything. But so your first record, you got Nat Hentoff, who was one of the more respected critics in the history of jazz. That first generation, along with Leonard Feather, Ira Gitler, Barry Ulanov, and those people. Nat is not with us anymore, right?
No.
He was a very active writer, also from the Boston area originally.
Yeah.
So he wrote that very nice thing about you, where
he was supportive. He just said yes to write my liner notes. I went the old-fashioned way, an album with liner notes, and I put it out on my own, and a couple of years later, when I had 2 more albums to put out, we decided together with my friend Colin and Oded Levari, my partner until today on Enzik Records, we decided to gather a few of us that have albums to put out and create officially Enzik Records. And the idea was to have a little catalog so people will actually talk to us, because back then there was still distribution. Now everything changed. This was like 20 years ago, and now it's like everything is digital and everything is social media and self-promoted and Spotified. So, but back then there was still physical products and distribution was crucial. And, the record label business is something definitely, it's changing, absolutely changing. So, we have Enzik Records, and I'm very proud of all the records that I've done.
Here's an example of her catalog, and a lot of different Joel Fram, very fine tenor player, a lot of Anat's things. Her latest is Quartetinho.
Right.
And a nice record of duets with Hilary Gardner and Ehud Ashiri. He was a very fine piano player.
Yeah.
And, some New York people that people don't necessarily hear too much of, and who should be heard more. So I think it's a very nice some Duduco da Fonseca and some other people. Very it's quite an impressive production that you have going here. I think I was very moved.
And the 3 Cohens, this album that just came out, the 3 Cohens, my 2 brothers, and the WDR Big Band, arranged and conducted by Oded Levari, who is the partner and not only my partner at the record label at Enzik Records, but he's also a wonderful musician and arranger. He's the musical director of my tentet. Oded is amazing. We can spend a whole hour podcast just talking about Oded. But yeah, so we Enzik Record exists still until today. And I'm very proud that all the records that I've made of under my name or leading and co-leading all came out on Enzik Records, and I have control of what is done, who they are sent to, whether we print, if we make vinyls, the dates, however. It's nice. It's not because I'm a control freak, but it's nice to make a plan, and you can work together with the touring. You can coordinate everything. I don't need to ask favors from anybody. I can just make a decision, make a plan. So that's the business side of music that has nothing to do with the notes I play. It's like the timing and the tour and the promotion and the social media and the posts and the and yeah, it's a lot of details that unfortunately now the artists have to carry on their back as well, in addition to being a music creator.
Well, that's one of the main things I admire about you. The fact that you can manage to have wear those both of those hats and wear them both well.
Well,
And
that's definitely when I say it takes a team, because on my own there's no way I'm barely I can barely reply in an email. So I mean I can reply, I just don't get to it because I travel.
well,
So
Machiavelli, who gets a bad rap and deservedly so at times, but actually who Machiavelli was, he wrote this book called The Prince, and it was basically instructions to a prince of how to be a good prince. And I didn't really read everything in that book and everything, but a friend of mine pointed this out to me, that Machiavelli in chapter 22, I believe, tells the prince that you are only as good as who you choose to work with you, and that you will not be able to do everything yourself. If you think that you're going to be able to handle every role in your cabinet by yourself, you will fail. And without getting too political, there's some people I wish would know that. And we might take a look at what's going on around us right now in the country
see who they surround themselves with as well.
Yeah. So we have this problem, but that you've had the wisdom to choose wisely in those who you keep close to you. I think that's a very admirable quality, in business that you've been able to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you. I reinstate the no BS politics of just be honest, be kind, be considerate, It doesn't take much to
Honest,
be okay.
kind, considerate. That's when you look at it from a distance, it looks beautiful, and we aspire to that. And then when you look at specific situations, trying to be all three of those things in every situation is at times requires some effort. I mean, to be honest, kind, and considerate, to honestly tell somebody, well, I can't use you anymore. You know what I mean? And
yeah, but I mean, there's reality, but there's also the way to do it. Like, don't fire your assignment over an email. That should be a given. And have the courtesy, even the hard decision and the hard moments, everybody. Yeah, but I have the right to do what I want to do. I'm like, yeah, you have the right to do what you want to do. It's true, but you can also find a way to consider the other person's situation and try to do it in the best possible way. Even if they're not gonna like it, at least you gave them the courtesy of being kind and make an effort to this is, and we live in New York. I live in New York City. This is like it's a tough place, and we're lucky because we're surrounded by many musicians and we always have options, and some other people, if you live in a small city somewhere far away and you only have like four people to choose from, then this is the people you're gonna play with, and this is it. But New York is like, okay, man. If a young person asks me for advice, I'm like, don't be an a-hole. Just be, show up on time and be nice. Be cool.
Yeah,
Playing nice is not enough. Playing good is not enough.
no, because there's always somebody else who plays good.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, actually, getting to there's another thing that you and I share uh, is a love for Brazil.
I
Porque eu falava português, mas
Ah,
esqueci português porque
esqueceu não.
nos anos demais não estava com os brasileiros. Eu
Você,
aprendi italiano e quando falo português, eu mudo entre italiano. É
exatamente.
uma bagunça,
Acontece.
uma bagunça. So I remember some, me lembro qualquer gíria. I remember some
As
slang,
gírias são boas,
yeah,
yeah. Bom.
and this and that, but I'm sure I'm not Portuguese. I once spoke fluent Portuguese,
Yeah,
and
you still do.
you can probably tell by the remnants of my Portuguese, but I tend to go into Italian in the middle. And Claudio Roditi almost cried one day, my dear friend Claudio, because I had it down with, we would actually speak Portuguese with each other quite frequently when I got back from my time in Brazil. I spent 7 months, almost 8 months in Brazil in 1974. Uh,
You
my in Rio, I lived in Lagoa, right
wow.
between Ipanema and Copacabana. My first wife was Japanese, but born in Rio, which was very unusual because most of the Japanese were in São Paulo. It was unusual.
Right.
In fact, her name was Miyoko, and she said that the people in Rio would even name their dogs after her and her sister Miyoko and Toyoko. It was so rare to see a Japanese in in Rio in those days. And her father had something to do with the Bank of Japan, so they had a very nice apartment in Lagoa,
Nice
and
place.
so I ended up spending 7 months. I had been playing with Chet, and Chet needed a little dental work done, and I had this insurance policy that my parents had taken out when I was born that came through when I was 21, and I was now 22, so I had the money to go down, and we could live with her parents. That also kind of facilitated the marriage part of things for visas and to do all these things. And I, I'll tell you my Brazilian experience in a nutshell, because I'm sure you know these people as well. Um, when I was there, Dave Liebman came down with Miles. They did a concert in 1974 with Miles, and Mike Brecker gave Dave my information, and so Dave and I practiced together for a day and hung out, and I went to the Miles concert at night, and this kind of thing. But then Dave had gone the night before to this little club, um, Le Bateau, which is a French name, the boat, but that was had Lucio Alves and Johnny Alf, and I don't know, did you know Johnny Alf at all? Well, they called him O Pai do Bossa Nova, the father of the Bossa Nova, because he, had written one of the a lot of the
Yeah.
early bossa novas and all this kind of thing. But anyway, Dave said, "Hey man, you should go down and sit in. There's two bands there, and they sound good. And why don't you go play with them? You probably have some fun." And I hadn't really gone out and sat in yet. I'd been practicing a lot, and I'd been there for 2 or 3 months, maybe 2 months, and but I hadn't sat in with anybody. I'd gone and listened to some chorinho and some, very traditional Brazilian music, and had gone to one concert of Baden Powell as well to hear him live, which I was always wanting to do. And anyway, I went and sat in, and there were two bands there. And so I kept coming and I kept sitting in. And then they hired me to play with Lucio's band. Uh, and the saxophone players were Mauro Senisi and Raul Mascarenhas.
Wow, beautiful.
You know those guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will talk about them in a minute. But the beauty of it was for the next few months, like 3, 4 months, we played 5 nights a week. And I was technically employed by Lucio, but I'd sit in every set with Johnny Alf.
Wow.
And so I would like take a little drink at the Bucciquin, which is the little bar next to the club where you could stand up and have a caipirinha or a cachaça, uh, what's the caipirinha or a bachita, they call it, and a little taste of cachaça and whatever they want to have in it, and then come back to the club, and I'd miss one tune, and then come back and play the rest of the set with Johnny Alf, and then go back up to the bandstand with Lucio, duck out for another caipirinha at the Bucciquin, come back and finish that set. So I was pretty much playing every night with both bands. And Lucio called me aside. Lucio was from Minas de Gerais. And Minas de Gerais is sort of like Texas. That, in a sense that I found that Brazilians from other parts of Brazil, and this doesn't want to offend people from Minas de Gerais, because I'm sure there's wonderful people from there. But they said, you got to look at the people from there. They're a little bit underhanded sometimes. Just look at, kind of be careful. So Lucio called me aside and he said, I'm going to go on the road. I want you to stay longer in Brazil and I want you to tour with me. And I have very good gigs. I have television shows. I have all these things. But I don't want to bring these other saxophone players. I don't want to bring Mauro. I just want you because that's enough. And it will be good money and you don't need these guys. So I had become their teacher. When I was there, I was the first American to come to Brazil and show them, technically the things you learn about playing jazz with, 2-5-1s and scales and modes and that kind of stuff. I didn't go to Berkeley, but it's that same stuff that, Barry Harris, Phil Woods, Berkeley, what we learned. So I was there, and Mauro and Raul were, even though we were the same age, I was like 2 years older than them. I was 22, and they were like 20. They became my students and my friends. And finally, I turned Lucio down. I said, no, I can't do that. These are my friends, and I won't do that. So when I left Brazil and we go back to America, I told them the story, and they said, oh, that's very nice. We're glad you did that because, the first month that you worked there, we paid you, but he didn't pay you. We took it out of our pocket.
Wow.
We paid you our money to keep you on the band. And then finally he agreed to pay you, but it took a month and a half of us paying you out, and he never reimbursed us or anything. So anyway, that was, I was very touched by that kind of Brazilian unique generosity that
They do have unique generosity. Obviously, not all of them, but when they do, it really is generous and it's very genuine. It's very beautiful and it's very inspiring.
Yeah, they say Deus é brasileiro. God is Brazilian.
Yeah.
They like to tell
Eu
you
sou
that.
brasileiro. Deus,
So,
né?
so I have a bunch of names here that I'm curious about. That if you ran into them or had any, experiences of, I'm curious. Um, now Mauro Senisi
Yes.
is a wonderful flutist and clarinetist, a flutist, not clarinetist, and alto player.
Alto player.
And he was in fact, he and Raul came to New York and stayed in my basement in Manhattan with my ex-wife and I, the four of us in a one-room basement apartment. They came for a month, and
Things we endure when we were young.
the things you do when you're young, and they were crazy. They'd never seen McDonald's. They'd had Bob's. Bob's was the hamburger stand in Rio that was sort of based on that.
I know, Bob's.
Yeah, Bob's, right? But they went. I thought this is so funny. Here they are in New York, and what are they going crazy over? They like Big Mac, Big Mac. We want, and that they came to
Mauro is great, and he's always creating. He's always producing something. And I think it was last year when I went down to Rio, and he was recording with Romero Lubambo and Cristóvão Bastos. They were recording all Garoto's music, and I just came by the studio to hang out and hear them playing. And I mean, they're so nice.
Yeah, and he did a thing with Edu Lobo.
Yeah.
And have you had any contact with Edu Lobo at all, or?
I'm actually on one of those records that he recorded. I put some clarinet on a few tracks.
Oh
One
wow!
of those, yeah. So, but that was, the modern way. So I wasn't in the studio with them. It was me doing that.
Right, I'm doing a record like that now.
But yeah, I met it. He's amazing composer and amazing creator.
When I was there in '74, I tried to get with Edu, and he was just writing the music for the novelas, the Brazilian soap operas.
Yep.
Which was the one time that the Brazilian, there's such a difference in class in Brazil, the upper class to the middle. There's a huge social gap, which is becoming that here too as well, but we won't get into that. But, you would find the maid would be watching the soap operas, the novellas with the lady of the house. That was a common thing that, that everybody of all classes shared what was going to happen to these soap opera people. And Edu's profession, he said he was only interested in doing that at that time. He was just writing music for the novellas. And
the way to stay home and make some bucks.
Yeah, he did that. So you didn't really get to know him at all, but
no, I met him, but we didn't yet have a lot of hangs musical. But maybe it's next visit to Rio. Maybe it's a good idea.
yeah, I'm telling you, we got a fan here, and I love his song "As Mesmas Histórias." Kills me,
Beautiful songs you write. Gee.
Yeah. Now there's an alto player down there who is like he's actually from France, and he's I believe Moroccan. Idris.
Yep, I met Idris. He's great.
Yeah, he's like the Brazilian bird.
Yeah.
He's wonderful. I met him in France when he still hadn't gone to Rio yet, and was just there. I was there with Chet Baker and Claudio.
Wow, I didn't even know he's not from, because he was the teacher of my friend Daniela Spielman. She's a saxophone player from Rio de Janeiro, and Idris was one of her teachers. So I always thought he's Brazilian.
No, he came from Paris.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, because
he's been there for so long.
Yeah, he's been there so long. He's practically Brazilian now. And then another person that I don't know if you ran into him, but I hope he's still around. A guy called Tio Laercio de Freitas.
I never met him, but yes.
Yeah, he was a piano player.
Yeah.
Great musician. He kidnapped me.
Really?
Yeah, he kidnapped me for a day or two. He told my wife at the time, he told her, I'll give him back to you in 2 days. He's going to stay with me. And he told me and this is when I'd first gotten to Rio. I hadn't played at Le Bateau yet. But he said I wasn't doing Brazilian music right. And that, that it was definitely in two. And he showed me the divisions of how the notes were divided, how chico to chico, chico, chico to chico, chico, where the accents lay. In feeling that, he really sat and gave me classes for 2 days about that, and practiced with me and played with me. And then he had an ulterior motive because he had written this beautiful theme that he thought should be for a movie. So we made a recording of it, the two of us. He loved my tone, so I played his theme, and that he didn't tell me how to play. But everything else, he said, don't be like Americans. You think everything should be in four. There's a difference between the two and the four. And there's a difference between Brazilian concept of two and Latin concept of two. Our clave is not exactly the same. He showed me that stuff anyway. Yeah. He was very helpful. And did you know Mauricio Einhorn?
I actually just met him for the first time like a few months ago. He came. We were both hanging out in someone's gig at the Blue Note in Rio.
Oh, yeah, he was, he wrote some nice tunes. He wrote that tune that Cannonball recorded called Clouds.
Yeah.
And I used to go over to his house and play jam with him. Did you hear him play harmonica? He's like
Yeah, of course.
he's and oh, there were so many cats. João Donato.
Yeah, beautiful. I know he left us recently.
He did. Did you ever get next to him to?
Yeah, but not officially, like in different situation, but never really got to hang and play, and it is amazing.
Yeah,
Swinging.
yeah. Was there a recording engineer named Bill Horn?
I
The guy
don't know
down
if I
there.
met Bill Horn.
Bill Horn, you didn't know him. And Paulo Mora.
Yes, of course. Of course. A big influence, and his sound is part of who I am.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
We were very close as well. He wanted me to stay longer in Rio too. He wanted to record a record with him and me and the nucleo of an escola de samba
Okay.
doing the
Wow, that would have been
traditional.
cool. It never happened.
It never happened because I had a chance to go back to New York and be with Chet Baker. So I made chose to join
It's
Chet.
still the choices you make, but
Yeah,
that's what we talked about.
but he did come to New York,
Yeah.
and in fact, I had the honor of introducing Paulo Moura to Sonny Rollins.
Really?
Yeah, and he was so
Where
happy
was that?
at the Vanguard because I'm friends with Sonny for a long time, and I told Sonny who Paulo was, and he was very happy to meet him. So even after the gig, we hung out in the dressing room with Sonny for a minute, and they got to talk, and I translated, and Paulo was always grateful that I had.
Oh,
And did you meet Jerry Maretsky?
I
Jenny
don't
was
think
his
so.
girlfriend, a very tall, blonde woman. She had been a ballet dancer, and she and Paulo had his complex relationships, let's say, and this was one of them. And and did you know an alto player named Zeka Maretsky?
I don't think so.
Zeka, no, Suarez. Zeka Suarez was his last name. Yeah,
No.
he was her daughter. But anyway, Paulo was a. For those of you who don't know, he was the cat with Chorino, right?
Yeah.
The the Chorino style goes back to someone called Pichinguinha, and I guess the most popular Chorino that the average person might know is Tico Tico, is probably, but it's a very particular style of uh, of music, and Paolo was the cat of that. Could you tell me a little more about Paolo and your relationship with Paolo Mora?
We met through obviously through Shoro, so the music show through Shoro. I actually met him when I came down to Brazil to perform with the Shoro band that I had here in New York, the Shoro Ensemble. We were touring, and my friend Daniela Spielman, who I just mentioned, she brought Paolo to our gig, and after the gig we hung out, and it was such an honor to meet him. And a few years later, Paquito called me. It's like, Anat, you know who's in town? Paulo Mora. Let's go to my house. And so we all met in Paquito's house and we played. And I brought the guys from the Shoro band that I had here in New York for years. We all came to Paquito's house and we played for hours with Paulo. And so and I'm following his recordings, his inspiration, his and making people dance with his clarinet and the saxophone too. So really an incredible voice, kindness in his eyes, and just swinging and soulful. Yeah, I really loved him.
Yeah, he was a very beautiful cat, and so there were um, now Baden Powell you probably didn't catch, right?
I
He was
didn't get
after
to meet
you.
him though.
and
Music.
there were yeah, there were just so many interesting players around Rio in those days. I mean, there was um, well, Bebel Gilberto
She
had
was still in Rio.
in Rio, yeah, and she had a Zé Carlos was her musical director, I think was his name, and I actually went to Sao Paulo only one time. I was in Rio the whole time, but I made one trip to Sao Paulo to hear Elis Regina.
A trip worth taking.
Yeah, it was the only time I ever, of course, got to hear her, and it was really worth taking. And so you go back. How often do you go back to Brazil?
At least a couple times a year.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I love, ever since I went to Rio for the first time, there's something about like arriving to that city. I mean, I can't really describe it, my relationship with Brazil and the way I feel inside the music. It's like some kind of belonging, longing and belonging to something that is not part of my roots. Like I don't have anything Brazilian in my family, but the music moves me in a way like when I try to sing something and I sometimes I burst into tears and I'm like I can't explain why I get so emotional with this music. I mean, beside the fact that it's freaking the best ever, I mean, but beside that, it really moves me. And coming to Rio, arriving with the airplane like years ago when just for the first once, twice, seeing from the airplane the view of the city, feeling this feeling, the heartbeat in a certain way, and it start getting
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I feel like wow man, I want to be more here. There's something, and of course the choices we make, and I constructed my life that at some point at the end of 2000 was the first time I went to Brazil for the first time, and I bought a ticket for 2 months, and I knew one person really, and everybody's like, "Oh, who are you going on the road with?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just going." I was like, "What? What do you mean you're just going? What about your gigs? What about New York?" I'm like, I feel like I need to go. New York will wait. New York will be there. And whatever needs to happen is going to happen. And my life got completely, it changed me. The experience, the really experiencing being there. And I know because you were there, being inside the music, being, and people just take the beer bottles like, da, da, da.
The
Everybody,
match, the little wooden matchbox they had then, they could
everybody's
put to
like with
work and
the,
stuff. Yeah, you'd see somebody just in the Buchiquin, the little bar, sitting there.
like how the music is like is leaking from the people's, like you feel that it's part of the people, and it's not like, and I got to the point where I felt a little bit that jazz, like at that point, I felt more like elbowing, like the music was like the musicians were playing and the audience was listening, and I didn't feel that how they meet each other. And then I went to Brazil, and my whole perspective of how music can bring people together changed, because wow, it doesn't, you're on stage but you're off stage, but we're all singing, we're all experiencing, and then it's like it
Uh,
changed my being as a musician.
yeah, me too. They say the Brazilians would say "canto quanto morto."
Ah,
Brazilians, they sing when they die. Even, and the other thing, what you described, I kept thinking when you were talking about that feeling of a nostalgia for something that you've never experienced, but yet it seems like you have. You might call that, a saudade.
saudade.
The real saudade is that feeling, because I had very much what you described was the same feeling that I had. I'd never, but just as soon as I got there, as soon as I flew over those 4 hours of Amazon, thinking about the better not be anything happen to this plane, because if it does, I'm somebody's breakfast. You know, some things breakfast, I should say. Um, but the feeling of finally being there, and I didn't do anything either. I had no professional connections down there. I knew Victor Assis Brazil, who was
Great person to know.
he had been my best friend in Boston when he and Claudio Rodini were my two real Brazilian buddies. And but Victor was having some problems. But I didn't go there to think about working. I got there. I knew that there was some kind of thing missing rhythmically in me, not necessarily lacking in jazz. I still had good time, and I did this, but there was some kind of depth. There was some kind of depth of rhythm that I needed to get, and I wasn't quite sure where. But then I saw life giving me this Brazilian experience. So I was like, aha, this is where that thing I'm looking for that's going to connect me rhythmically to deeper rhythmic connection to music as a whole. You know, because when you listen to Sonny Rollins, there's something in Sonny. There's a few things that makes him different than other people, but one thing that you really feel in Sonny, and not just because he plays a calypso. You know, he could never have played a calypso, you know, and still would have retained this quality. There's something that's an infectiousness to his rhythmic feeling that you know, it could be genetic, cultural, growing up in the Jamaica in the island community, that kind of thing, you know. But it's definitely a part of him, and you know, I might have an affinity for minor keys. You know, you and I might have some kind of natural
maybe something,
genetic,
maybe affinity to D minor, maybe
D minor. You know, there's something about that. You know, but you know, there was a definite. So I felt that Brazil, just besides loving the music so much, was going to give me that, what you're talking about, that interconnection to a feeling of time that that really would broaden everything about your music.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and playing playing because all the instruments are rhythmic. So you know, like all the instruments are rhythmic, but us as horn players, you know, to figure out how the articulation can mimic the percussion, can be part of this. It's different accents, you know. The I always say, like, it's not tico tico, it's tico 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 tico. It's something shorter, and the to place the note is all on top. It's like it's a different. The feel, it's the percussiveness, it's the rhythmic. It's like, so it gives you. I mean, any country in, like, you know, the different countries in that I got to explore a little bit in South America, between the Venezuelan, Colombian, Argentine, they each have different rhythmic and different feel. You know, so it's all understanding. It all makes us better musicians. But the
Yeah.
Brazilian, wow, those rhythms, it's
Well, things like the cuica, you know, just that's a fascinating little thing. That woo, 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 woo. That part of the. By the way, when I had this operation, I no longer have a singing voice. My larynx got locked in a certain position, so I can't even sing a scale. So going woo, 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 I can't get a high register. So you have to just imagine. But you know, the sound
I
of
know you can. It doesn't come out, but I know you
yeah,
can.
of the cuica, and you know, there you go. She'll do it for me. Uh, you know, so that's you know, there was also, you know, a saxophone player who was in New York for a while, a Brazilian cat, who you may or may not know. I don't know if he's still alive. He was kind of a madman, but he played well. His name was Protown,
I did not know him.
and he didn't sound. He was very aggressive playing and very tremendous technician. He could play all over the horn. He was in New York in the '70s for a while, and I met him in Brazil as well. And I remembered because his father had been a physicist, and he told me he had a sister, Electron, and Proton, Electron, and there was another one, but I said there was no neutron, as I recall. They hadn't had that. Uh, anyway, he was another trip, you know, and vocalists. Now, you know, you do you have favorite singers that you grew up and say lyrics of songs and that kind of thing? Do you relate to tunes in that way, like of
In the jazz or the Brazilian?
well, both. You know, for instance, I would say, in Brazil, there's Elsa Suarez, and there are
Oh, Elsa was amazing.
Maria Bethânia. And,
Yeah, Betania, of course, but my heart, I mean, I fell in love with Beth Carvalho, with the
ah,
voice, with her voice, with the way she sings samba, like this rainha. It's like, and the way she caresses the melodies, there's some relaxation, some kind of laid back, but so grooving, and I love her singing. And of course, Elise is Elise. And but the same as as I loved learning a lot of songs from Ella Fitzgerald, just to learn a song and a phrasing of the lyric, to hear the lyric for us instrumentalists, that we have to play melodies, and express a song. I mean, I love to play songs. Then give me a beautiful melody, and let me. I don't need to take solos. I just want to take a melody and just service the melody. And our my teachers are the people that can service the melody with the lyric and give the meaning. So I want to do the same thing with when I play the clarinet. And so Ella, I listened a lot to Ella and Louis. you know
so just one further question. I'm thinking that you had Phil Wilson at Berkeley, and into your adult life, or your post-school life and everything. Have you had certain mentors, like let's say Paquito and this kind of thing? Did you have certain people that you were especially, I had, for instance, Sonny Rollins, Lee Konitz, Cyrus Sullivan, and then there were many others, several others, Phil Woods, and different people who were influential on me. But I ended up with very long relationships with those people. Have you had, like, especially close relationships, say, with some elders? Not just saxophone, not or clarinetist, but I mean, could be any instrument that they.
No, the of course Arnie. We talked about Arnie Lawrence. Arnie Lawrence was my the first really person that I felt was my mentors, because it's the first person that we had conversation about music, but not just from it was not a technical side of which notes to play on which scale. It was like about searching for the beauty in music. Arnie. I mean, Arnie talk. I mean, I thought, and then my naive me thought that I was the special person, and then after Arnie passed away, I realized that every person that ever met Arnie has the same beautiful conversation with him, because Arnie was like that. But he spread his magic dust. But Arnie was really influential. I mean, with all this fear that I described to you of a person that's like, no, 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 I can't, I don't know. And I went with my brother Yuval to see Arnie playing years ago. And Yuval, he knew that we were both playing, and Yuval went to play, sit in with his alto sax back then. And then Arnie told him something, and Yuval did a move that was the first and last time he ever did in his life. He came to me, I was in the audience, and he handed me his alto saxophone. And then later when I asked, what did Arnie tell you? He said, give your sister the horn. So, and he just handed me the sax and the alto. Now, I never played alto in my life. I played everything a fourth apart, but doesn't matter. Arnie had this like, we're all welcome. Music is for everybody. The same feeling I had when I got to Brazil. Music belongs to us. It's not like to the people that know and that only they can play. So I became an Artie devotee. I would go to Jerusalem. He had this gig in this place called the Pargod. And basically Arnie would walk like Moses, would walk around Israel and would find musicians and would just, with his kindness and his way, he just told them, and they would just whoever showed up every Wednesday, that was the gig. So it could be like 8 saxophone player and a kazoo, but there would be the people playing. And he would make music with whoever was there. And sometimes it would be great jazz musicians, and everybody would just go. We would play. He would point at people. He would direct. So Arnie really was a mentor in a way of like, wow, music is what we want it to be. It's
He
not
used to
like,
do that at a little bar on the east side.
I know, at the
The
Nightingale.
Nightingale, that's right, the
I was
Nightingale
there. I
bar.
came there when he was still in New York.
That's right. Now you visited him when you're talking about it. You were already in New York. You were just visiting Israel.
No, I was still in Israel. That was before I moved to New York. I was maybe post high school.
So Arnie was already in Israel
Yeah. Maybe it was not the final move, but he was there for that period. He was already with Lisa and he was already living there in Jerusalem. I think the center, he established the center a few years later. I was no longer living in Israel, but he was already in Israel. So he was kind of new there. And he was just, I mean, and he's the one who had this conversation with me because we talked about my having two brothers that are musicians and talking to me about being an individual and not to compare myself with them. And, the really person that gave me some confidence of like, you are you're good enough, you are who you are, like, and this is like invaluable, this kind of like mentorship. So he sent me off to my life in the United States in like a much better place to be. So Arnie was my main guy. But of course, later on, the people that I met along the way, musicians and non-musicians, because I became friends with, collaborate years later with George Wein and with Dan Morgenstern, that, we would bar hopping and, he would exhaust me because Dan Morgenstern, not being years older than me, and he just passed away last year and he was 95, I think, and but we would go out to hear music. It's like, okay, but let's go to next place and let's go here after that. And I'm like, dude, I'm exhausted. It's like, no, one more place.
Funny, yeah.
And he would tell me like stories about Billie Holiday, and it's like, so when you meet the people that live this music, it's amazing. And of course, Paquito is also been also great supporter and mentor and so it yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
it's a beautiful bunch of people. It really is. We're fortunate to, blessed to be part of it.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's what the kind of, that's a beautiful story about Arnie too. I see him in a different light, when I speak to people that knew him that way, because we knew each other more as, even though he was a little older than me, we were kind of on the scene at the same time. So like music not really having age, but I remember staying up when I was a kid, even before I started to play the saxophone. I used to love it when Johnny Carson would feature him when the band would play, and there'd be an alto solo sometimes. I knew that there was something special going on there. I would wait for the alto solos, and he was part of the Tonight Show band. But,
Yeah,
uh,
Tommy Newsom.
right, well, he was the substitute leader.
Yeah,
I mean, Newsom would sub for Doc Severinsen,
right.
who was the main leader, but Tommy Newsom was the other guy.
Yeah.
And but well, this has been very a tremendous amount of fun to talk with you, Anat.
Same here, but wow, I love knowing everything you told me today. I'm fascinated.
And just before we go, I do want to just go through the fact that you have quite a nice tour schedule, and this is something always nice to bring up
All
because
right, okay.
not everybody is working. So
I'm
the fact
grateful.
that you have uh, an active musical life, especially in this post-COVID world.
Oh yeah, it's true. I thought I'll never be on stage again when we were in quarantine. I
Yeah,
thought I'll never shake anyone's hand after a concert. There's no way. I'm never gonna say hello to anybody in person. It's like, you guys stay away from me.
yeah. Well, I'm considered high risk, so I can't even go out in public. So it's too bad because I'm trying to make a new record and I can't. In fact, I want to talk to you separately about that kind of thing.
All right.
But to go out and promote it is just out of the question.
Yeah.
But you have coming up this month. You've got America. You're going to be in D.C. I think your next gig is the 18th in Washington D.C.
Yeah, I'm gonna be on the 17th in Massachusetts at Great Barrington,
That's
and
right, Great Barrington in Massachusetts, the 17th.
in DC. Yeah, this month, because I just got back, I was gone most of April, and then at the end of this month, I'll be with the Pacific Jazz Orchestra in Beverly Hills in LA. And then I'm gonna have a couple of shows in Brazil, and then I'm going back to Europe. But then,
Well, you go to London before then, I think.
before London, I'm gonna be in Brazil.
Oh, good.
There's BNDS on June 6th, and maybe Sesc in São Paulo on June 1st, and yeah, this is like, and then European tour, and then July and Stanford. Yeah, this it's gonna be.
Germany and Switzerland,
Yeah, I'll be zigzagging a little bit
and then finally home
around
to
East West.
Birdland in
Oh yeah,
July.
I have a week at Birdland. It's true. The second week of July with my quartet.
Well, that's wonderful that you're working so much, and
I know, I'm so grateful.
yeah,
I
you
don't take it for
deserve it.
granted, especially not after the pandemic when we saw like, you know.
Yeah. So I really thank you again, Anat. This has been Anat Cohen, and we've been having a wonderful time with her, on the real side. We'd like to thank you for tuning in, watching us, and ask you to please give us a like and become a subscriber. We have around 2,000 subscribers now, and it's growing. It may not seem like much, but it actually means a lot to us, to Jesse Kaiser and me, to have you as subscribers. And once again, can't thank you enough. This has been a lot of fun, and Anat, have a wonderful time with your touring, and keep making that beautiful music, and letting people know that the clarinet is alive and well.
Bob, I love so much our conversation, and thank you so much for. It's really great to just sit and relax, and after the moment of like, okay, we're talking in Zoom, but after a while, we're just having a conversation, and it's just so relaxed and so beautiful, and you have so much music and stories and in you, and it's just been such an honor to be able to spend these couple of hours with you.
Right back at you, kiddo.
All
All right, thank you, and thank
right.
everybody, and we'll see you next time on the real side.
Bye, everybody.